Hello, my name is Hannah McAndrew. I'm a skin specialist based down in South Wales. This is one of my educational videos. I am a published author on acne causes and treatments. Also have my own skin clinic based down in South Wales. I'm an educator for Nimu Skin Technology, although my educational videos are always generic, so they just talk about ingredients and clinically proven treatments. And today we're talking about acne. So bacterial acne, something that I suffered with for a long time. And as a therapist, I got very frustrated with it because I tried every single skincare known to man. And it was only really when I started looking more at ingredients and how they get into the skin and how you can almost heal the skin from inside out that I really managed to start tackling that condition. I am 4 years later managed, I'm acne controlled. I wouldn't say I'm cured because I don't think there ever really is a cure, particularly when you've got underlying hormonal issues as I have, which I know cause my acne. But I'm certainly much happier with my skin now than I was this time 4 years ago. So what are we looking at today then? Let's have a little look at the symptoms of acne first of all. There we go. So the 6 main symptoms are on the screen here, so hopefully you can see those. On the top left, I've got the open comedone or the blackhead. So most people know what a blackhead is. If you've got them on your own skin, you tend to see them around the nose, chin, forehead area, but you can have them elsewhere as well. Back and chest might be a prominent area for these. We'll have a little look actually what causes these a little bit later, but it just looks like a little black dot on the skin, and it's actually a plug of dead skin and oil that's actually sat in the pore or in the hair follicle. And the reason it looks black on the top is because the very top part of it is actually oxidized with the oxygen in the atmosphere, so it becomes dark. So it's got a little bit of pigment there. So that's your blackheads. And then we've got then what we call the closed comedone or the whitehead. So that's exactly the same. You've still got your clogged pore with all of the dead skin and oil, but you've got this little layer of skin over the top of that one then, which is why it appears more white or skin coloured than the blackhead. So because the surface is cut off from the oxygen that's in the atmosphere, that one does not appear black, but nevertheless they are pretty much the same thing. Now it's important to know that if you've actually got those two symptoms, that is enough to classify you as having an acneic skin. So even if somebody doesn't suffer with breakouts, they still have acne because, or what we call a grade 1 acne, because they've got the blackheads and the whiteheads there. Over onto the right then we've got a papule. So that is like a closed comedone or a whitehead then that doesn't actually come to a head with pus. So you can see there is probably pus in there. It's all inflamed, it's like a little hard bump under the skin, and they just tend to just subside on their own. So they start off as a blackhead or a whitehead and then they fill with pus, which we'll have a little look at later why that happens. But it is certainly closed off. If you were to kind of stick a pin in that, which I don't recommend that you do, then there would indeed be white pus inside because there is an infection in there then. Same with the pustule. So the pustule down the bottom left there, so that is like a papule, or it can start like a papule and then it opens and the pus will actually come out of that one then onto the surface of the skin. So I think most people who suffer with acne are familiar with those two symptoms there, and the blackheads and the whiteheads. But as I said before, a very mild acne case can just be the blackheads and the whiteheads. Cysts and nodules then. So these are a more severe type of papule and pustule. They are over 1 centimetre in diameter. The nodule is just a very large papule. So a nodule you can say is a papule that's over 1 centimetre in diameter. Very painful, as you can imagine. And you've got your cyst then, which is even bigger again. And obviously you've got that filled with pus there as well. Now anything that involves a cyst or a nodule, anything that's over 1 centimetre in diameter, would not be allowed to be treated cosmetically, like in a salon environment. So generally speaking, if you are suffering with those, then that would be a medical referral then. So how does this start then? So a lot of people, when they think about the causes, there's lots of different causes as to why these things happen, and sometimes it's like a knock-on effect then. So one cause causes another symptom, that can cause another symptom, and ultimately is what happens is what we see on the screen here. So let's go back a little bit further. So how did the blackheads start in the first place then? So I've got a little picture of like a cross-section of the skin here, so we can see the layers of the skin, the epidermis on the top in red and blue. And then underneath that, then you've got your dermis, and that is where your hair root is found, inside the hair follicle. Below that then in the yellow you've got the fat cells. That's the fat cells are nothing to do with acne, but certainly the hair follicle in the dermis, the little sebaceous gland next to it that looks like a little cauliflower shaped thing, and your epidermis on the top, they all contribute to acne. So let's have a little look at this close up. There we go. So let's talk about the epidermis first. The top layers there where you've got the red and blue cells. Now obviously they're not red and blue in real life, but they're just colour just to show the nucleus and what's living and what's not really. So the very bottom layer of epidermal cells there you can see in the red and the blue, that is where the epidermal cells are made. So we call that the stratum basal, and the cells there are basically dividing. So they divide, and then the mother will make a daughter cell almost, and the daughter cell will migrate upwards. Hence you see further layers on top of that stratum basal. Now as it's migrating upwards, it's going to mature, it's going to compress, it's going to become a lot flatter, which is how you see them flattening out in the diagram there. And over around 28 to 30 days from the point that that skin cell is born, that's when it reaches the top. It becomes what we call a stratum corneum cell. It's cornified, it's pretty much dead, you know, it doesn't have any kind of liquid in it anymore. It's quite dry, and then it just falls off. And that's your natural exfoliation of the skin. So that's important to know. Where you have your hair root then, you can see this almost kind of dip in the epidermis. So when we're talking about that follicle then, that kind of contains the hair, that isn't a separate structure that's put into the skin. That is literally the epidermis travelling along, and it goes down. So all along the bottom of that hair root there, you can see there's more of those stratum basal cells. Now, inside the follicle, therefore, you're having this process happening. You're having skin cells being born, being made, being created, being pushed up through the layers of the skin, and then they're maturing, drying out, becoming stratum corneum cells, and sloughing off. Next to the hair follicle then you have that sebaceous gland that looks like a great big cauliflower. So that's got its own sebaceous cells or sebocytes that make the sebum, and the sebum gets pumped then into the follicle. And if the hair is intact, so if that particular follicle is growing a hair, the hair will act like a wick to take the oil or the sebum out of the follicle onto the surface of the skin then. So that is a normal skin, or what we call a healthy skin. I don't like the word normal when it comes to talking about beauty therapy and skincare. So in a healthy skin, that is what should be happening. However, in the acne skin, what you'll find that happens is there's a few things that go wrong with this process. So hopefully you can see on the diagram there, first of all, we get trapped skin cells. So this is one of the causes as to why people get comedones. And ultimately then inflammation that causes acne. So you've got these trapped skin cells in the follicle itself and potentially on the surface too. So we call this faulty exfoliation or faulty desquamation, where some people's skin cells are just so tightly glued together they just physically cannot exfoliate themselves, or they exfoliate themselves very, very poorly. So what happens then is not only does the top layer of skin to touch feel really rough and thick and potentially a little bit scaly, you've also got within the follicle, you've got all of that dead skin building up in the follicle itself. So hopefully you're starting to see now how this can start causing a plug or a blackhead in there. Nobody really knows the cause as to why this happens, which makes it a little bit more difficult to treat. I think ultimately when we know the cause of this faulty exfoliation, it becomes a lot easier to treat. So that's one of the reasons why this follicle gets clogged and ultimately leads to a blackhead and then potentially papules and pustules later on. The second cause is something called trapped sebum. So where we talked about that little cauliflower looking thing, that little sebaceous gland pumping oil into the follicle then, sometimes people make too much oil. Sometimes they make oil that's thicker. They're just naturally or hormonally prone to making thicker sebum or more sebum, and that's just getting stuck, combined with that dead skin cell in the follicle. You're getting that plug then, leading to your blackhead and your whitehead. So there is usually more than one cause as to why somebody has acne. Last but not least, then you've got these P. acne bacteria. Now, P. acne bacteria live on the skin anyway. Even children have this in their skin. They only become a problem when they get stuck in the follicle. When somebody has a blackhead because their skin does not exfoliate itself properly and or excess or thicker sebum, The P. acne bacteria that would naturally live in there then start breeding, feeding on that dead material, and they start causing inflammatory signals then. So what does the immune system do? They think, oh my gosh, there's bacteria living in here, it's going to cause an infection, or it is causing an infection. They send all of that inflammation to the follicle. White blood cells go down there, they start to make pus, and that's why we get papules, pustules, cysts and nodules then. So that is in a nutshell why we have acne. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense then as to why it's important when we're trying to treat this that we look at more than one area. So some people will just treat the bacterial infection, some people will treat the excess oil, some treatments will treat the fact that the skin doesn't exfoliate itself. But in my experience, you need to try and treat all three of these. Are there any factors that make you more prone to this? So let's have a little look at those, because there are. So first of all, hormones. So the reason why somebody's sebum might be thicker or more in quantity than others is because of hormones. So it's the male hormones that cause this, so androgens like testosterone, but there are others. If somebody's got an excess of those, that is going to make the sebum thicker, it's going to make the skin more oily. Now, this is why we see acne a lot more in teenage boys than teenage girls, because of that kind of spike in androgens that they have during adolescence. But in females as well, I've got PCOS, so I know that my testosterone levels are quite high, and that is why my skin is oily. So prior to my skincare that I'm using now, my skin was very, very oily. I also got some facial hair down here, dark facial hair, so I knew that, you know, whatever that was going on with me was definitely hormonal. So pleased to say that I've got that diagnosis now, and actually up to 1 in 5 women can suffer with an excess of androgens and be undiagnosed. So more often than not we see adult acne in women. So we got the hormones there that potentially make this worse for some people, or make them more likely to get blackheads and whiteheads, and therefore inflammatory acne. Then we've got genetics then. So we don't really know why people's skin does not exfoliate itself properly, but a lot of people believe that is due to genetics. So if your parents suffer with acne, the likelihood is you may suffer it with it as well, but not always. Comedogenic ingredients then, so some makeups and cosmetic products can actually increase the likelihood of the follicle getting clogged. So ingredients like mineral oils, so like your liquid paraffin, like your baby oil type products, Vaseline, certain dyes like red dyes that you can find in blusher, which is why some people get blackheads on their cheeks, even though we don't really have many sebaceous glands in that area. Ingredients like squalene, coal tar, which can be used in some medicated shampoos. There's quite a lot of comedogenic ingredients, so I'll pop a link in the comments to a site where you can go and just check that you're not using these in your own skincare. Now, thankfully, a lot of skincares nowadays will put non-comedogenic on the label if they definitely contain none of those comedogenic ingredients. So it is a little bit easier nowadays to check that your skincare definitely doesn't contain those. And also it's important, I think, to check your makeup and your sunscreen as well. So a lot of people forget about those, even though they're being applied to the skin. UV light. So UV light, yes, okay, it's responsible for tanning. It produces a melanin stimulating hormone, or MSH, in the brain. Or the brain produces it once it's exposed to UV light. Or the brain produces it once it's exposed to UV light. And that can actually make the skin oilier, believe it or not. So a lot of people say to me, well, how come my acne clears up when I go in the sun? And the best evidence that I've got for that phenomenon is that in high humidity, I live in the UK, so our summers are always humid, the sebaceous gland temporarily stops making as much oil. However, when you go back to normal then, come home from your holiday, or the sun goes in and the cold weather starts again, it's not so humid and it's more dry, the sebaceous gland therefore goes into overdrive. So treating acne with sunlight and heat and things isn't really a long-term fix, and definitely UV light will stimulate this MSH hormone, which is going to make more sebum. So we don't recommend UV light in any way, shape or form as a treatment for acne. In fact, UV light actually kills a lot of the Langerhans immune cells that live in the top layer of the skin that actually defend. So it's really, really important that we are wearing sunscreen every single day, whatever type of skin concern we are trying to treat. And last but not least, then we've got friction. So something called acne mechanica. So some people have never suffered with acne, or think they've never suffered with acne, and all of a sudden we're wearing these masks on our faces because of COVID, and it's rubbing against the skin, and it's bringing out breakouts. So a lot of people are telling me that their masks are causing acne. Well, actually, it takes about 8 weeks for a comedone to form anyway. So if you are breaking out, that congestion was already in the skin. Something is triggering the immune system to send a lot of blood and a lot of immune cells to that area to stimulate inflammation, and therefore you're getting spots. So ultimately, it's the fact that somebody has blackheads initially that is causing acne, whether that's acne mechanica or any other type of acne. So just bear that in mind, that friction can actually be a contributory factor. It's not a cause. So the ingredients and treatments that are clinically proven. So if you are a customer watching this or a potential client who's trying to maybe self-prescribe, please just use this as a guide. I personally would recommend you go and seek the advice of a skin therapist who's got a lot of experience at treating acne, because ultimately we do all have access to very similar ingredients. Some products are stronger than others, and I think whoever is experienced will know by looking at somebody's skin, looking at somebody's lifestyle, looking at somebody's medication and allergies, etc., to know where to start and where to increase to when it comes to strength of ingredients. Some treatments are way too strong for certain skins. They have other concerns going on as well. So it's really, really important that we seek the advice of a skincare pro when we are looking to treat acne. So the first thing that I'd be looking at is treating the faulty desquamation. So the reason why somebody's skin isn't exfoliating itself properly. Now, a lot of people at this point are thinking, well, I'm just going to scrub my skin, I'll just exfoliate it with granules. That isn't going to work. It's not going to get into the follicle, which is where the congestion is sitting and causing blackheads and whiteheads. And also, just taking the top layer of skin off doesn't actually really teach the skin to do anything. If anything, it's just removing that protective layer. It is disrupting the barrier. It is causing the lower cells to migrate up a little bit more quickly to replace those cells, and therefore then they are not going to mature properly. So if anybody is going to be treating faulty exfoliation, I'd always recommend you do it with a chemical route. So things like AHAs, BHAs, things like salicylic acid, retinol, vitamin A based ingredients as well will do this for you, and also enzymes. Now, again, this is why it's really important to seek the advice of a professional, because retinol or vitamin A derivatives can be quite irritating on some skins. So you want to go to somebody who's going to look at you as an individual person and what is causing your concern and how much your skin can tolerate. So definitely get somebody on those types of ingredients to treat the faulty desquamation. We're going to control the sebum levels. This can be done medically as well. So a lot of people go on the pill, for example, to balance out the male versus female hormones, and therefore then some people who go on the pill find that their acne becomes better, and it's because they're making thinner or less sebum. In a salon, it's a lot more difficult to do that. There are some plant-based ingredients that claim to do this, but there's very little evidence for that. Some moisturisers will kind of superficially mop up excess oil, so by all means, if anybody wants to use those, then I would recommend those for somebody who is suffering with that excess oil. You want to try and be controlling or killing the P. acne bacterial infection. So there's a few ways you can do this. So blue light therapy, certain types of laser will kill the acne bacteria in the follicle as well. Using topicals like tea tree, not neat though, again go to somebody who knows what they're doing when it comes to formulations and ingredients. So things like tea tree, but also really helping the good bacteria on the skin. So wearing that SPF to make sure you're not killing those Langerhans cells, and also taking a probiotic to make sure that your gut health is intact, and therefore then the good bacteria, the rest of the body can flourish, and you'll also get less inflammation as well. Which brings me on to point 4, actually, to try and reduce the inflammation. If somebody's coming to me with a very severe case of acne, the first thing I want to do is get rid of the inflammation that's there, or at least calm it down before starting any active treatment. So again, blue light therapy is really good for this, using just very simple non-soap based, non-stripping ingredients to start with. Just very, very basic skincare routine to get the skin's barrier back intact before moving on to more active ingredients that treat the faulty desquamation and the sebum levels. There are certain types of medication as well that a doctor may prescribe that can help to reduce the inflammation. So if a client's on an antibiotic for acne, for example, most of them just work by killing those acne bacteria. They're not actually treating the oiliness or the faulty desquamation if you're on antibiotics for acne. But some, very few of those antibiotics can actually reduce inflammation as well. So they are potentially treating it in both ways. But personally, I don't like the use of long-term antibiotics to treat acne unless it's a very resilient case that isn't responding to the other methods. Because, like I said before, there is a reason why somebody's skin isn't exfoliating itself properly. There's a reason why somebody has an oily skin. Bacteria is almost like a secondary cause of acne, even though a lot of people think it is the first main cause. And avoiding those comedogenic ingredients, friction and UV light, so any kind of stimulus that anybody knows triggers off their acne, just avoiding all of those things to treat the concern. Now, I'm aware that that is quite a lot of information to take in on one video, so if you are thinking that you need any extra help from me, you can indeed book a skin consultation at hannahmcandrew.com. Ideally, you can come in to see me. I'm based in South Wales. However, these can be done online if you are looking to just treat it topically, and obviously I can see a photo of you online, or you can send me a photo and I can discuss whether I think that it's a mild enough case to be treated with just topicals alone, in which case we can send products to you. If you are wanting maybe just to email me, info@hannahmcandrew.com, just to see if I can find somebody who's a little bit more local to you if you do have a more severe case. And if you're a therapist watching this who has enjoyed my teaching, please subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button, it doesn't cost you anything. And yeah, hopefully that has taught you a little bit about acne and the reasons as to why we have it, and then that makes it a lot easier to treat. If you are a therapist, there is an acne course on my website where we go into all this information in a lot more depth. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope to see you on another video again soon.